All right. Well, hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to FS Expo 2024. Happy to be back once again, and good morning to all the online folks as well. Kicking off this morning, we are doing a presentation on international flight dispatch. So we've done, Matt and I have done presentations in the past that have focused more on domestic operations. This year, we're changing it up a little bit. Same theme, but we're kind of focusing on international, so ETOPS operations. So some of the long haul. So who's excited for the PMDG 777 coming out here in a few days? So hopefully, all right, yeah, me too, right? So we've all been waiting on that one. So I think hopefully after today, you'll get a little insight on what goes into the planning on some of the wide-body airplanes on some of the long-haul flights. So I'll turn it over to Matt. We'll do our introductions, and off we go.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Bartels. I'm a flight dispatch instructor for United Airlines. I teach new hire dispatchers coming into the airline how to become domestic dispatchers there. Got a long career, been dispatching about 15 years. Started off at a regional called Compass Airlines. Did everything there, was a line check dispatcher, a trainer. Kind of the career progression, you move up to a major airline after about 5 years. United was always the goal, but they said thanks but no thanks quite a few times. So I went on to Delta Airlines. Never lost the dream, so I kept applying at United, and they finally said yes. They did that at the absolute best time in the world in January of 2020. So I've now been there for almost 5 years, and I couldn't be happier. So.
All right. Figure out this clicker here. So there we go. My name is Mike Collier. I'm also a flight dispatch training instructor with American Airlines. My progression was similar, but a little different path there. So I started my career at Mesa Airlines back in the kind of mid-late 90s. Then went on to America West Airlines in Phoenix, Arizona. Spent about 10 years there until the merger with US Airways. They relocated us to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Spent some time there until the merger with American Airlines, and now I'm in Fort Worth. So that's my progression with that. So I also do, like Matt, we do some new hire training, recurrent training for the dispatchers every year. Also do qualification training for different international divisions, things as well. So I'm just about just under 30 years total in the industry, all in flight dispatch at this point. So it's career progression again. It's similar to pilots, right? You start at the regional, you build experience, and then you kind of move on from there. So I'll give you back to Matt, and here I guess we'll do just a quick domestic recap, just to refresh your memory on some of the things that we did last year before we jump into the international portion.
So if you've attended any of our previous presentations, we focus primarily on the domestic area of operation. That's where a lot of people do their flight simulator flights here in the US. We're branching out international here, but we would be remiss if we didn't kind of recap. So again, just any dispatch release, you can't release a flight unless your charted minimums at the airport are at or above your landing minimums at your ETA. So we got to read our TAF, make sure that we have minimums to launch. Then alternate airports for departure. If we were to blow an engine and we can't get back to our departure airport, we have to list an alternate airport for departure. We call that a takeoff alternate. So can we lose an engine? Check our landing minimums at our departure airport. If we don't have them, then we list a takeoff alternate, we call them. Domestic operations, the regulations say that we must list an alternate at all times for a flight. However, if the ceiling for an hour before and an hour after is 2,000 feet or better and the visibility is 3 miles or better, we can actually not list that alternate if we deem it appropriate. So we call this the 1, 2, 3 rule. So we'll check that TAF, ceiling greater than 2,000 feet, visibility greater than 3 miles, no alternate necessary. And then our fuel supply for that domestic flight, and this is going to be a huge point of this presentation, how the flag and internationals are different. When we launch a domestic flight, it's got to be a minimum fuel to fly from A to B, so where we're going. Then if we list an alternate, we have to be able to get there, and then fly for 45 minutes at normal speed cruise. So that's domestic. So what makes flag flights different? Well, flag flights are anything that starts in the US and leaves the US, the contiguous 48 US. So we operate under a different set of rules to do that. And we have all kinds of differences. We have augmented crews, we have different alternate requirements, we have all kinds of fuel planning options. This is where we can get really creative as dispatchers to plan fuel. We have to deal with ETOPS. We have to start looking at different meteorological things. We start seeing meters instead of statute miles. We might see winds in meters per second instead of knots. And then our chart minimums look different. Again, meters versus statute miles. And then they're complex. They have long flying times. We have foreign airspace requirements that are different from ours here in the US. The fuel planning requirements are more complex. And then the aircraft are really heavy, taking on a lot of fuel, a lot of payload, because this is where the airlines make a lot of their money, is on this international flying. So I'll have Mike kind of walk through the basics of how we plan the routes.
All right, so obviously we need to have a good route, right? So these are really long flights, and having the most optimum route is really kind of a make or break on whether the flight makes money or not. All right, so we'll use some SimBrief examples as we go through today. I know that's becoming a pretty powerful flight planning tool online. Everybody who uses SimBrief? Everybody use SimBrief? Yep, just about everybody. Huh? So anybody still use PFPX? All right, one guy. All right, now I'm with you. No, I was a PFPX user. I still use PFPX occasionally in case I need to do something there. But so for today, SimBrief has generated the following routes, so you can kind of see what we're doing here. So we're going to depart New York, go to London Heathrow. So we'll break this down into three basic portions. So we'll talk about the departure out of New York out to the track entry point, then the oceanic portion over the North Atlantic tracks, and then the exit point onto London. So how do you know what to plan? Right, that's always the challenge. Or do you just go with what SimBrief gives you and then put some fuel on and off we go? So a little background on this, right? So New York out to TUDEP. So knowing what to plan there, so we get a North Atlantic track advisory message every day, and Boston Center puts out a Boston North Atlantic advisory message every day. So this provides guidance to dispatchers on how to get out to the track structure before actually entering the track structure. So little QR code there. So there's a website. You can access this every day and look at it on this. And we'll provide all these QR codes at the end. I think we're going to upload that on possibly Discord or someplace where you can get to it after the presentation. So don't worry about grabbing everything now if you don't have an opportunity. So you can find the track message at this location. This is an example of what this Boston advisory looks like. So this comes out every morning as well. So this provides detailed guidance depending on if you're departing maybe New York or Newark, Philadelphia, some of your East Coast airports, provides guidance on how to get to the track structure. So and we have to plan this, right? So if you try to plan something else, they're just going to put you back on this particular route. Right. This N439A, that's known as a NAR, North American Route. Right, so when you see these, and it's really just to expedite the flight planning process. It's a common and a non-common portion. There's really an inland fix and a coastal or oceanic fix on that. So as you see those, that's really kind of what's happening with that. And have you ever seen this on SimBrief or on your charting or the Navigraph charting? When you zoom in, you see that spider web there. So those are your NARs. All right, so if you've ever wondered what all that mess is as you zoom in, that is the North American route system. Okay, so that gets you out to the track structure on this, and then at this point we're in oceanic airspace. That's when you're going to follow that North Atlantic track message. Okay, so the North Atlantic, it breaks it out into these areas of airspace on this. That NAT Doc 007. It's that North Atlantic Operations and Airspace Manual. It really breaks down the procedures and the defined airspace there. So if you're really kind of into the long haul flying, this would be a good document to dive into and read. Who does the cross the pond events every year? Yep, so if you guys do any of the cross the pond stuff, this is probably really good information to read and become familiar with on that. So a little fun fact, use of the OTS, or the Organized Track System, is not mandatory. They publish it every day, but you are not required to use it. It's optional, okay? So there are two alternating flows. You get an eastbound and a westbound flow every day. So those are published, the westbounds are the AM, the morning flights. So typically that's your heavy, westbound flow in the mornings. Everybody departs, Europe coming back. Eastbound is in the evening. So everybody's departing, in North America going to Europe. So that's kind of your two primary flow in that area there. So another little fun fact for the day. So that at 30 West, that's kind of the dividing line between Gander and Shanwick airspace out over the North Atlantic, or otherwise known as the Molson-Guinness line. So as you cross 30 West, and I heard that from one of our captains years ago, and I thought that was hysterical, so it kind of stuck with me. So there you go. So that's that will forever be known as the Molson-Guinness line now. There we go. So we'll step through real quick on how to read these track messages, right? So when these things are published, this is what it looks like. And it's a few pages long, depending on how many tracks are active for that day. So initially, you're going to see, so it's going to start with a letter on there. So that'll be the track name. So in this example here, it's track Victor. And it'll be the track entry point. So Victor enters at 2 dep. Following that are your track points. These are your lat-long points for the track, and then the exit point there at the end. Right, so that'll be your track exit point there at Gisty. Below that are your available flight levels eastbound. So not every flight level is available. It's just depending on the track and what's published. Right, so in this case, we have 34, 35, and so forth on to 40. Westbound, so we're talking, this is an eastbound trip this evening. So westbound flight levels, nil. So there are no available westbound flight levels on track Victor. And below that would be any required routes after you coast in on the European side. So in this case, there are no required routes after coast in. Below that, remember we just talked about those NARs, those North American routes. So so NAR 445 Alpha and 439 Alpha would pair up with track Victor. So as you're doing your flight planning, those are the two North American routes you want to look at. So we've made the oceanic crossing. Remember our exit point is Gisty, and from Gisty onto Heathrow. We have a defined route here. So this gets pretty deep, but I will just say that this all comes from a document called the RAD, the Route Availability Document. If you have a little free time on your hands, it's about 700 pages. It is updated, and it's effective with every AIRAC cycle that's published out there. I will say SimBrief does a pretty good job on providing a route that will validate with Eurocontrol. So SimBrief, there is the validation portion of the flight planning system there. So you'll see the little Eurocontrol icon there. So you have to validate your route just to make sure it will be accepted by European ATC. So selecting that button, you can run that through the validator. Looks something like this. Right, so your flight plan will be presented. You can copy and paste it into the Network Operations Portal link, which is also provided by the window there. And to get to the knob, of course, you follow the link. And what you're looking for once you get to the network operations portal, the unprotected, it's the public-facing side. Right-hand side, you want to scroll down a little bit, and you're looking for that free text editor. So if you click on that free text editor, you'll be presented with something that looks like this. You can copy and paste your route into that, click on where it says validate, and if you have done your job correctly, it will come back and say no errors. So that's the idea. When you want to get a validated route, so when you file it, it will be accepted by the system. We talked a little bit about the alternate airport for destination for domestic, so our 1-2-3 rule on this. So there's a little modification, so it's kind of a modification of this 1-2-3 rule for flag operations. So if a flight is scheduled for more than 6 hours, we always have to have the alternate. So for less than 6 hours, that's really kind of one of the few opportunities where we can not plan an alternate airport for the destination under flag ops. So you can kind of see it's a modified 1-2-3 rule. So it's 2,000 feet or 1,500 above the lowest approach mins, 3 miles visibility, or 2 miles more than whatever's published, the lowest visibility minimums on that. Right. So we'll go with Manchester, UK for our destination alternate on this one today. So again, kind of similar to the domestic 1-2-3 with a little bit of a twist on that. So ETOPS. We start talking ETOPS operation. Another fun fact, ETOPS has nothing to do with flying over water. Who thought ETOPS was all about flying over water? Nope, not true. It just means ETOPS is anytime you're more than 60 minutes away from an adequate airport. You can have that over land, right, depending on some of your remote areas out there. So it has nothing to do with flying over water, never did. Okay, so anytime you're beyond 60 minutes from an adequate airport, that is when you are officially in ETOPS airspace. Okay, so what is an adequate airport? So the bar on that is pretty low, right? Just to be an adequate airport, you just have to have an airport that meets the landing performance requirements, being able to land and stop within 60% of the runway length that's available. Has to be a certified airport or an active and operational military airport, and that's about it. The airport itself doesn't even have to be open. You just have to have an open runway. Okay, so it's, and really when we're talking adequate airports, it's just a point of reference on the map to define the ETOPS area of operation. It does not require weather minimums, anything of that nature, all right? So it's just a point of reference. Okay, here's another big document for those of you that want to do some light reading. It's an advisory circular. Again, we'll provide some information for that a little later, but 12042 Bravo, that's kind of the ETOPS Bible, right? So this covers everything, ETOPS and Polar. It really breaks out the various ETOPS rules and operations there. So up to 180 minutes, beyond 180 minutes. So that really gets into some of that. It's about, I don't know, 120 pages worth of that information as well. So also, when we're doing planning for ETOPS, we have to consider time-limited systems. And really, this is where a lot of the limiting factors come in when we're doing ETOPS operations. So, and it's really all about the cargo fire suppression. How much time do we have on the cargo fire suppression system? How far can you fly if you think you're on fire before you run out of cargo fire suppression? And usually that's going to be the limiting factor on how far you can operate as far as like 180-minute ETOPS, 240-minute ETOPS, 120-minute ETOPS, things like this, right? So this is really one of the defining systems when we have to look at that.
Up one.
There we go. Wrong button. All right. So the up to 180, again, our most limiting system is our fire suppression. So they take that and they subtract 15 minutes off of that, so to kind of define our maximum area of operations. Beyond, when you start getting to beyond 180 minutes, The rules change a little bit. So then they're also looking at the fire suppression capability and the next most limiting system. So the moving parts get a little more complex on this one, but ultimately you still have to remain within that ETOPS area of operation. ETOPS alternates, right? We talked about destination alternates a little bit, but now for ETOPS operations, the rules are still the same on how we derive alternate minimums, except now we have to meet alternate minimums from the earliest time of landing to the latest possible time of landing. So a lot of the flight planning systems will calculate these times for us, and that's just for dispatch purposes. Once we are en route and underway, all we need now are operating minimums or approach and landing minimums, right? So if we take off, we're flying along, the forecast changes, it no longer meets alternate minimums, but as long as we have approach and landing minimums, we're okay to continue without changing the plan. Okay. Alternate selection, how do you know which airports to take a look at? So this advisory circular, the whole premise behind that is this preclude and protect, right? So really you want to try to operate to the shortest diversion time possible, right? So you don't want to just arbitrarily throw out there, yeah, I'm going to do 180-minute ETOPS just because it's easier. I don't have to look at as many airports. So that really kind of goes against the guidance of the advisory circular. So really the idea there is you want to try to plan your shortest time. So plan your most efficient route, okay? Plan your best route, and then use the ETOPS operating rule that's going to provide you the shortest engine out diversion time. So for example, 120 minutes rather than 180 minutes. So that's really the premise behind the operating rule there. So I think this is a little video clip here that's embedded. We'll kind of go through and show you how to do a little sim brief setup on this. Let's see if we can get this to go here. There we go. So the target scenario there, we're looking at the adequate airports. So the entry airport there, we're going to use, looks like Gander. So you want to set up your alternates in there, and if you click validate, it might come back and say the weather may be below minimums, right? So it's looking at some of the ETOPS alternate weather, right? So you can drag that over and kind of see what's happening there. So it's going to flag it if it thinks that your weather is not going to meet ETOPS alternate criteria in there for that, right? So it'll tell you. So if you can go back and maybe make some changes based on what SimBrief guidance is getting you or what you're looking at as far as the forecast, make some adjustments there, and it'll come back and say ETOPS scenario is valid for the scenario that you're trying to use. All right, so again, that 60 minutes, that's that threshold time, that is for your 60-minute adequate airports. You know, and so anything beyond 60 is ETOPS airspace. Circles, lots of circles on the map. So we'll kind of explain this real quick as far as what you're looking at. The little circles that you're looking at are your adequate airports. The big circles are your ETOPS alternates. Right, so we're going to use Gander. You hover your mouse over that. It gives you the weather for Gander. For that, the little circle is your 60-minute range. For that, once you get beyond that 60 minutes, you're officially in ETOPS airspace. It shows you what your ETOPS entry point is at that 60-minute boundary. And it goes. ETP, equal time point. So that's a point in which you're equal in flight time based on still air conditions. Okay, so if you had to turn around and go back to Gander or continue on up to Keflavik, your flying time would be equal. Again, for planning purposes, it's all based on still air. Operationally, it's all based on application of wind. So you could have actual diversion times that would exceed your still air times. Okay, Keflavik, there's kind of your mid-ocean alternate up there. Again, the big circle is your ETOPS area of operation ring. The little circle is your 60-minute distance. And then on the other side, so there's a second ETP between Keflavik and Dublin. and your exit point. So once you hit that exit point, now you're back within 60 minutes of an adequate airport. You were no longer in ETOPS airspace. Can you save the questions till the end? Thank you. So that's kind of the route planning, the oceanic portion on that. We'll get to your questions here toward the end. I'll give you back to Matt real quick to go through some fuel planning and go from there.
Yeah, so fuel planning is where we can get really creative, and the airlines want us to, because this is where we save a lot of money. And the reason being is we actually have 4 different options, and it's really kind of 5 options planned within these 4 different options. The first one being just a general flag rule. So the regulations tell us when we plan a flag flight, it's pretty much all that same domestic stuff, but we also have to have 30 minutes of holding speed 1,500 feet above our alternate airport. That's what we call our flag reserve. So we had that 45-minute domestically. It's down to 30 now. But the caveat is they want us to be able to have 10% of our entire flying time as an additional contingency factor. That's a lot of gas. So if we're flying for 10 hours, they're gonna want us to have an hour's worth of gas in addition to that 30 minutes. The airlines don't like that. That's a lot of gas, a lot of fuel, and a lot of potential payload we're holding off. So we got ways to get around that. But just to kind of show you what's going on here, this is our flight today to Heathrow, what those fuels would look like. So 6:30 en route, that 10% gas there, that's 39 minutes. Our alternate is 37. There's our 30 minutes for the FAR reserve, giving us a minimum takeoff fuel, what we actually have to have when we throttle up at 8 hours and 16 minutes. So we can configure SimBrief to do this for us. It's pretty easy. We're just gonna go into our reserve section on SimBrief, and we're gonna go from 45 to FAA flag. And then we can hit generate. Once we do that, we'll take a look at the briefing preview. Excuse me. And then we can see it here on our fuel ladder. So we'll see our 10%. And then if we take a look at our minimum fuel for takeoff there, and we look at our planned fuel for takeoff and our extra, we'll see we have no extra. So if we take any sort of a taxi delay, we're in trouble. So we want to come in here, add a little bit extra fuel. So I added 20 minutes of extra here onto this flag release. All right, well, we have some options. We have something called Operation Specification B43. What this allows us to do is really the same rules, right? But instead of that 10% for the entirety of flight, we only have to do 10% for the entire time we're in Class 2 airspace, which is any time we can't fix our position off of a ground-based nav aid, like a VOR, for more than an hour. So very small amount of airspace, and we're not in it very long in the North Atlantic, so very small amounts of fuel. But because we're bringing that down, the FAA says, all right, well, instead of 30 minutes, we're bringing that back up to 45. But it's not that big of a deal. So here's our Class 2 airspace. It's really only that blue shaded portion over the Atlantic. I think you can see this fuel's gonna start coming down drastically, and it does. So that 10% B43 is 6 minutes as opposed to that, was it 28 or something first? Sad part is, SimBrief can't do this.
Yet.
Okay. But what it can do is it can do something called Operation Specification B343. And there's 2 options for B343. The first one is what we call the 5% rule. So instead of having that 10%, they want us to have 5% of our estimated time en route instead of the 10%. And then still our 30 minutes and be able to conduct a missed approach and all that stuff. So how do we do this? Well, you have to have a minimum arrival fuel program. So we have to simulate this for our own flights. So we're going to go in, we're gonna do B343. We're gonna go to the arrival fuel dropdown, and we're gonna set a minimum arrival fuel. I suggest using something like 60 minutes. You can choose whatever you want, but it has to be in that column, it has to say minimum arrival fuel of something. So we'll go in, and we'll make the selections, put in our arrival fuel and generate the flight. And it pops up. So there it's showing 5% fuel as opposed to 10% fuel. So we're gonna look at that minimum takeoff fuel and see that we have no extra. So if we take a delay on the ground, we're not getting off the air. So we're gonna add some extra fuel back in to protect our minimum takeoff fuel. And there we go. So here, the breakdown, a little bit more than B43, but still not too bad, a lot better than that 10%.
Little side note, not all formats in SimBrief support B343 yet. I think the United format and I want to say
United,
maybe
American, Delta, JetBlue, and Southwest do. I tested all those.
yeah, so I think more formats to come, but also just real world, just so you know, American and United are the only real world carriers that currently are authorized to do B343. Right, so like your Southwest, your Delta, they're not authorized for B343, just us. So we're special.
But we can bring that fuel even lower. We can do something called performance-based contingency fuel. So what this is the airlines actually track all of their fuel numbers. They track their overburns. And it allows us to, instead of taking 5% of the whole flight time, it'll just say, all right, well, no less than 5 minutes, but whatever your general average extra burn is, you can use that instead. So this data is very specific to aircraft makes and models, the city pairs, your arrival time windows. It's influenced by thunderstorms at the destination, so we have a higher value if we have thunderstorms. It's also proprietary, it's very different for every airline. So we can't give you actual values because I don't know them for every flight, and I couldn't give them out if I did. However, we can simulate it. So we're gonna go back in, we're gonna select that B343 again. And this time, we're gonna change something here, sorry. We're gonna select the ACF 99 value if we have thunderstorms, otherwise we're gonna pick ACF 90. So where that extra column is, we're actually gonna select ACF 90 or 99 based on checking the forecast and seeing if there's thunderstorms. We'll use 5 minutes for ACF 90, 15 minutes for 99. So when you do that, you'll see ACF 90 show up where that 5% was, and then you'll see our planned takeoff fuel there again. Again, we have no extra, so we're gonna go back in, generate our flight, edit it. Now this time, we have to change the ATC fuel or the weather fuel add, because we have to have that ACF 90 or 99 to drive SimBrief to do what we want it to do. So in these two columns here, that's where we're gonna make our adjustment. So I'll just throw my 20 minutes in here, and off we go. So there it is. There's my ACF 90 for 5 minutes, and then my min takeoff is there. That's what I have to have when I throttle up. And then there's my planned takeoff, so I got about 20 extra minutes off of that when I should be throttling up. So there's our PBCF, so 5 minutes. Then we got planned redispatch. This one is hard to wrap your mind around, but essentially what we do is instead of dispatching this flight to London Heathrow, we're gonna dispatch it to Dublin. And then we're going to run another analysis from Dublin to Heathrow. And we only have to carry the 10% of the estimated time en route from JFK to Dublin, and then from this point that we're going to reanalyze the flight and send it to Heathrow, from that point on to Heathrow, we only have to carry 10% there. So we can actually double dip and use these fuels in different areas. And what that's gonna allow us to do is bring that total fuel down, and it will actually let us get rid of that alternate because I only need to have that alternate if my estimate or my scheduled flight time is more than 6 hours. Well, from this place that I'm redispatching from to London, that's gonna be less than 6 hours, so I could leave the alternate off. So there is fuel savings we could find there. The caveat, though, is that I'm going to need to protect that first segment of the flight as well. So here, with that alternate, I have 121.1 for that first segment going to Shannon, I'm sorry. So Shannon and Dublin with an alternate. To go to London, I need 122.6. So that's what's gonna drive my fuel numbers at 122.6. Now let's say I take the alternate off. My fuel to go to London from JFK drops to 114.7, but I do have to protect enough fuel to go to my intermediate plan, which was going to Shannon and Dublin. So I actually have to have 121.1 on board, but based off the initial plan, I'm saving a lot of gas based on doing that redispatch. Sad part is SimBrief can't do this one yet either, so we are hoping they can get this one done. So here's kind of a recap of what the fuels were doing as we went through all the different examples and what SimBrief can and cannot do. So you'll see that redispatch will get you the best fuel numbers. Can you do this like really quick?
Okay. Yeah, just kind of quick on this. We were talking about ETOPS there a little bit earlier, right? So the part of the fuel planning there, we have to consider the ETOPS fuel critical scenarios. There's typically 3 scenarios that happen that are being considered and calculated. So either an engine out scenario, a decompression scenario, or if you're having a really bad day, both. Right, engine out and decompression, and usually that's kind of the most critical on that. So the additional fuel required, some of the bullet points you see here. So we're kind of baking into the planning some errors for wind forecasting, icing on unheated portions of the airframe called like ice accretion or ice drag. Just 5% for additional degradation, maybe engine performance. And then for that, the fuel for the APU, fuel for holding it at wherever you're diverting to, possibly, and for an instrument approach and landing. So that all goes into that critical fuel scenario planning. On that, hit the wrong button here again. Here we go. So it kind of breaks this down a little bit. You can kind of see. So the critical fuel at that first ETP, it is considering all of these things. Right, so you can see a column there for your 1 engine planning and 2 engine planning. So whatever the most critical on that would be, and you can see as you look on the left-hand side there. So your APU burn, your ice drag, your 5%, for wind errors. So the crew will see this on their flight plan. Okay, and then kind of the same information for the second ETP. Remember we talked about a little bit earlier how it's all based on still air distance. So occasionally you might see actual diversion times that exceed 120 minutes. That's okay. Okay, so the initial planning was based on still air. Actual operational goes with the winds. Okay. Same information for the second equal time point. And if you have more, en route alternates, you'll get, third, fourth, however many it takes to cover the area of operation. And so this really just provides information to the crew. Make sure you have a legal ETOPS flight plan. It is not a diversion plan, right? So once that's produced, it just lets the crew know, hey, I have a legal ETOPS flight plan. Once they're en route, the crews they're going to do whatever they need to do. They're going to divert to wherever they need to divert to based on the scenario. On that. Maintenance, some maintenance requirements there. So ETOPS qualified mechanics, technicians are required to review the airplane before departure, sign it off, make sure that it's airworthy for an ETOPS operation. APU in flight does require periodic APU in flight starts just to, for the reliability program. So that's something you can do. You can just kind of simulate that, just periodically do an in-flight APU start. Right, as you're doing your simulations on this. Some MELs have impact to ETOPS operations, right? Things like engine generators, or something's not working on the airplane. We might not want to fly it in ETOPS airspace. So that will be listed in the MELs. Things that have to be operational to operate beyond 120 or 180 minutes in there as well. So
I can do this.
Yeah, I'll give you back to Matt real quick. He'll just we're going to do a quick run through just some of the other theaters of operation.
So we kind of heavily covered the Atlantic here, but some of the other theaters, like my personal favorite, is like the Central East Pacific, sending flights to Hawaii. It's always 180-minute ETOPS. My other favorite is the North Pacific. I worked Pacific in my previous life at Delta. I loved it. It was my favorite theater to work. Very similar to the North Atlantic. We have tracks there as well, but we also have 207-minute ETOPS there, and we have volcanoes we have to worry about, a lot of volcanoes we have to worry about. South Pacific, that's sending flights to Australia. We cross something called the Intertropical Convergence Zone, which is just a band around the equator where we see a ton of thunderstorms, so that's a threat we have to deal with every single day. We pretty much plan our own routes out there, so we're not very structured. We can take advantage of the winds and avoid threats and give you a good ride that way. South America, it's pretty restrictive. Again, a lot of volcanoes. We have the Andes Mountains, so we have to deal with some decompression routes, some terrain escape routes, just to make sure the flight stays safe if something were to happen in that area. Not ETOPS from the US. And then my favorite thing to do as a dispatcher, we haven't been able to do it in a long time, but send flights up over the pole. The easiest way to get to China from the US is to go straight north. So we'll send flights over polar fixes, back down over Russia, over Mongolia, and down into China. It's awesome to do. We need all kinds of requirements like anti-exposure suits. We have to worry about space weather affecting our communications requirements. And we actually have to worry about our fuel freezing. So we have to do calculations to make sure our fuel stays safe and doesn't gel up. So very, very cool area to work, but unfortunately with today's geopolitical concerns, we can't do it right now. All right, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about what's going on at United. So let me just take a couple minutes of your time. We have these exciting pathway programs that are leading to very real careers in the airline industry, and I can't think of a better group of people to talk to you about. So we are going through a massive change in the aviation industry. There's retirements coming up, all kinds of expansion. People can get into high-paying major airline jobs well under what the industry average time is. And you know, the skills we have as flight simulators, they're not 100%, but they mirror a lot of the stuff the real-world professionals do. And if we take that knowledge and we apply it correctly, and we know what our flight simulators are and are not capable of when it comes to the real world, we can become great assets when it comes to the real-world jobs. So if we keep open minds and keep great attitudes, the virtual sky will not be the limit. So what's our traditional career path? Well, usually we gotta do check rides and build all kinds of hours. Usually major airlines wanna see college degrees. You have to grind your time out at regional airlines before you get there. You have to do all kinds of networking, and sometimes it even takes a little bit of luck to slot in. But we got the pathway programs at United now. We got Aviate, Calibrate, and Navigate. This is our pilot, maintenance, and dispatch program that are providing paths to jobs at United in those departments. So the Aviate program was launched in 2019. It's also coupled with a flight school, so people with pilot's licenses and people that are just thinking about getting into flying, they all have a career path to get into a first officer seat at United. So this would get your private pilot, start getting your instrument rating with an Aviate partner, then you start building your time, you fly as a captain at a United Express or a Part 135 carrier, and then off you come to United as a first officer. Calibrate program, that's a paid internship, apprenticeship, I'm sorry. We got 3 career paths on that. And then Navigate, that's near and dear to my heart. That's our Part 65 dispatch certification program. So if you wanted to get your dispatch license, we have a pathway there as well. And traditional Part 65 courses, they teach you how to get the license. We teach you how to get the license and become a dispatcher, and I actually help develop this content, and I teach it. So if you want any information on that, I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards. So yeah, the dream career starts with these pathway programs at United. So if you go to that QR code, we have all kinds of information on those if you were ever interested in pursuing a career in aviation. So. All right.
So as usual, we're real tight on time, but we might have a minute or two here to take a couple of questions. I know this gentleman over here had a question, I think, unless we answered it for you already.
Thank you, it was answered.
Okay, excellent. Any other questions? And this was kind of a fire hose. A lot of information went by real fast, right? So, yes, sir. So the question was, do we normally get assigned a theater of operation and stick to it? So it's based on our qualification, right? So it's if I'm qualified for Europe or Pacific or Latin, Caribbean. So it depends on the qualifications we have. Then we, like pilots, we bid for a schedule, right? So I might bid for a European line. So in that case, I would work a European theater operation or maybe bid Pacific. So it just depends on what I feel like working or what my seniority can hold as far as a schedule for that bid period. So yes, right in the middle back there, yeah.
More of a technical question. Once you selected a diversion time period between 180 and the weather changes, do you go to a higher ETOPS time, or is that regulatory compliance requirement?
So I think I heard your question. So is it asking, so if we plan for 120 minutes Can we change to a different operating rule? Yes. There's nothing in the advisory circulars, the regulations that says we have to stick with that operating rule. So if we start at 120 minutes and maybe Keflavik up there mid-ocean, and it's no longer a viable or a legal alternate, yes, we can amend the release and change to a 180-minute operating rule. So yes, we can do that. Did that answer your question? Yes. Okay.
Okay. I do have a bunch of goodies from the United Dispatch Department up here, so if you want to see me after we're done here, I'll hand those out.
Okay. Any kind of final questions here? We're here all the weekend. You can catch us if you have anything else that comes up, that we didn't answer, or if you happen to think of something later, feel free to reach out to us. And I think we were talking, all those QR codes and the links and everything to the manuals and some of the other information, we'll try to make those available for everybody on some outlet.
Yeah, we're going to post them in the. This presentation has a Discord channel. I'll be posting those in here within the next 15 minutes as soon as we're done here. All right, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, everybody.